Hello, my name is Darian Chambers, and this will be a brief presentation for the Module 8 assignment, benchmark assignment for problem-based research in action research. And for this topic and this assignment, I chose to take the time and process my action research plan on developing and implementing students' listening comprehension skills. And this would be at a college level. And the reason why I chose to do my action plan and research this topic is simply just because it hits home to me, and it's something that I have had to see throughout my academic journey since the start of it. So just to give some background, I was blessed with the opportunity to go to a few different schools, some for academics and then others for, scholarships to play a sport. And, I've attended large universities and smaller universities, and the tools that are available at some of the larger universities are not available at some of the smaller universities that I attended. And even at the larger universities, it was difficult for some of the international students to comprehend what was actually being taught in class. At some of the larger universities that I went to, there were tools and aids and different items that could help students comprehend what they were reading, what they were being taught, what they were learning in the classroom. They also had certain groups that would help them as well on campus. And although it was effective to a certain standpoint, a lot of the students still ended up leaving campus and dropping out and different things like that. And it was even worse when I went to a smaller private university. And when I attended the smaller private university, they simply just did not have the tools at all to help these international students. Although they promoted it and did it very well, once these international students came in, the resources were just not readily available for them. So it was actually more difficult, at least from my point of view. And when I spoke to some of them, it was harder for them to understand what was being learned, and it took them a longer time to adapt as they had to learn the language and different things like that. And they didn't really have anyone checking in on them. So that's kind of why I chose to do my action research plan over comprehension and listening for international students who are want to receive a higher education by attending a university. And not even just in the United States. I think this is something that should be worldwide, global. One thing that I saw was that a lot of the questions weren't really being asked, and they weren't really being followed up on. So a lot of the questions that, I would ask as far as the moment they stepped on to campus, being international, is, what is your comprehension ability and your hearing ability? And I would have to make sure that I had someone who could either one, translate, or two, it would just have to be conducted in an English setting, since a lot of the classes are being taught in, I shouldn't say most of them, all of them are being taught by English speakers, and that's their native language. They are not international from the same country that some of these students are from. If that happened, that's amazing, but unfortunately, that's not what always happens. The next question I would ask is, what would be the impact of the development of their listening skills to the students? Like, would that student be willing to put in the extra work to learn English at a faster rate than they normally would to help their studies. Would they be willing to do one-on-one lessons and English plans and different things like that to further along their education as far as to help their comprehension? A lot of times when I saw the students in class who were, who were with me in class and they were international, they would sit there and they would be able to read and they would be able to write it, but they still didn't comprehend it, and they would just go to their room and try to study the best way that they could, and that wasn't effective. So I would just want to check and see to make sure that they were willing to put in the extra work if they needed to stay after class if it was available to them. Would they be willing to do that to make sure that they understood what was actually being taught and what was actually going on? It would be a little tedious, a little bit more tedious for them, but I think that would go a long way. Also, another question I would ask is, what are these students doing to develop on their own? Are they actually taking the time to study on their own? And one thing that I can say from my experience is that they definitely were. I don't know about all of them. I know it's harder and more difficult for some of them. Some of them went to school for a year or two and then ended up going back to their home country just because it was too difficult. And once again, like I said earlier, the resources were not there for these students, unfortunately. And it's a terrible situation. You leave your country to come learn and the resources aren't available for you. At some schools they are, and at other schools they aren't, just due to funding. And then one of the last questions I would ask are, I would ask them how effective do they think that their listening is? Do they think that they're able to actually sit there and listen and focus for hours, and actually be able to comprehend what's actually going on and actually understand and be active, and have active listening while they're being taught and while things are going on around them and there's distractions, because it is a lot, like I said. Once all this information, was compiled and figured out and gone through, I think the very first thing that would have to happen is there would, once all these questions are answered and we have that information and it's gone through, we would have to put it to the test, and there would have to be a pre-test as far as comprehension and as well as different listening tests. And this wouldn't be to deter a student from wanting to attend the university, but it would help the university to see exactly where they would rank amongst the non international students who are on campus. How much work do they actually need? And it doesn't have to be a situation where these questions or the material given to them is extremely elaborate and in depth. And I don't believe it has to be that. It could be something that's very simple and very basic. And then it can be ramped up on a weekly basis for, that first month of school. So we can actually see and track and see, different levels. Just like when I was a freshman in college, we had to have entrance exams, and that kind of ranked us basically where we were and how hard we needed to work in certain classes. And, if you didn't score as well, then, you had to spend a little bit more time in a lower level course and before you can go up to the higher level course. And I would like to see that done in the same manner. And I think ultimately by, year 2, a lot of these international students would be light years ahead of where they would normally be if they just kept on the same path and just came over from their home country without knowing or understanding or being able to comprehend to the extent that they thought that they would be able to. After that, after those findings and all that information is put in and been put into play, one thing I would like to see is that, staff members would obviously have to evaluate and compare all that information. And then there would have to be, a decision made by staff as well as deans to follow up on these students and actually know and understand and make sure that they have the resources to attend to the students that are struggling and that are having issues and that are having, problems. Make sure that they're sending someone to, if they live on campus. 9 times out of 10, if they're international, they're living on campus, and you go to them and make sure you send someone to their room to knock on their door to make sure that, hey, is everything okay? Are you do you want to come down and study, and make sure those emails are going out. The communication is going out to let them know that they are being supported. That's one thing that I didn't see is a bunch of support, even from a big university to a smaller university. I never saw full support and follow up from the university. It was more like once they were there, they were kind of on their own with, their aid, if they even had one, and if they were even available, through vacations and different things like that. So that would be my action plan. That would be the research that I would want to do and participate in and study and learn and go through. I would love to see that, be implemented. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for listening with this course and the information that I have. You all have a good night. Thank you.